Hello, in this video we will talk about operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is different from classical conditioning in that learning is under the responder's control, or the animal's control, whereas classical conditioning is related to involuntary responses in animals such as fear or salivating. Here we can see that Skinner found that rats and pigeons will learn to press a metal bar or peck a disc for food. The response that is followed is called a reinforcer. And when you use a reinforcer, it strengthens the behavior and it will make it more likely to occur again. So in this scenario, the reinforcer would be food. Here's a close-up of the machines or mechanisms that were used to distribute food when the animals responded in the correlating ways. Skinner didn't like to use the word reward to describe a consequence, even if it increased the frequency of the behavior, because the word reward implies that the stimulus or event followed by a behavior is somewhat pleasant or desirable. So he avoided terms since some individuals will work for what others believe to be unpleasant, such as a child purposely irritating a parent so that they can watch their parent blow up. And so this brings up a valid point. Any behavior can be modified through operant conditioning, academic or social behaviors, but also undesirable behaviors can be reinforced just as easily, such as aggression or criminal behavior. And sometimes crime does pay. Disrupting behaviors in the classroom can result in the teacher and classmates' attention. And unfortunately, more productive behaviors don't. Therefore, teachers and parents need to be extremely careful about what they reinforce and what they do not. There's some key points in operant conditioning that should be followed in order for this to work. The reinforcer must be followed by the behavior. The reinforcer should always be immediately after. And this is key when working with young children and animals. Adolescents will also behave in ways for immediate pleasure. And we could see that having grades at the end of the year and not providing positive feedback immediately don't really align with operant conditioning values. Reinforcers must be contingent on the response, so only presented when the desired response has occurred. So setting rules for students but then not following through with them teaches them that rules can be broken. Think for a moment of a reinforcer that a teacher or parent might use. So we'll go over the different kinds of positive reinforcers, or not positive, but reinforcers that are used in the classroom or in home settings. So positive reinforcers could be extrinsic or intrinsic motivation. We'll talk about some of the extrinsic ones through the rest of this lecture. So material reinforcers such as tangible objects, toys, food. And I will share in this lecture that you should not use food with young children or children at all. And these types of reinforcers should only be used as a last chance resort. It shouldn't be something that's constantly used. There's social reinforcers, so a sign, a gesture, and positive communication. This can be a very powerful tool in the classroom, and it's also highly effective when it comes from peers. There's activity reinforcers with the opportunity to participate in a favorite activity. There could be token reinforcers, such as small, insignificant items such as stamps and stickers. Positive feedback, so clearly and effectively bringing about desired behaviors for change. Negative reinforcers, and this isn't what it sounds like, it's actually the removal of a stimulus. So for an example, everyone did well on the exam, so now no one has homework. Reflect for a moment and think about, is it easier to change behaviors through reinforcers than through punishments? Why would this especially be true for small children? So take a minute and reflect. For young children, information that stipulates what they did, that they did something wrong, is more complicated than stipulating what they did right. Younger children may simply have an easier time processing simpler, positive, rewarding information than negative feedback. Both Thorndike and Skinner indicated that adverse consequences were unlikely to reduce the behavior that followed. At a second look, some forms of punishment can suppress certain behaviors, and others are just found to be time consuming and ineffective. Let's go over some of these punishments. So, verbal reminders, these only work if the student's goal is not to get the teacher's or parent's attention. And it works best using a calm voice and close proximity. This should include that the person is capable of better behavior, what that behavior is, and that you care about them and their happiness. Restitution is when you take actions to correct a misdeed. So, an example would be a child who breaks something must buy a new one. Overcorrection, when someone must make things better than how they found them or left them. So, I know a big one at my elementary school was if you dropped trash or you purposely put trash on the ground, you had to pick up then 5 pieces of trash off the ground. Positive practice over correction. So repeating the same behavior but in a different way. A very common one is if you see or if there's a child running down the hallway, you have them go back and walk. The problem with all of these is that they draw too much attention to the wrong behavior, and they're time consuming. Suspensions. Out of school suspensions are extreme and usually not effective. Most students that are not behaving are also students that are having trouble completing academic tasks. Assigning extra classwork. Asking a student to complete work they missed, reasonable. Assigning extra work is inappropriate since it communicates that schoolwork is unpleasant. Here's a recent news article that I found, and the headline reads 50,000 preschoolers are suspended each year. Can mental health training for teachers make a difference? The article speaks on how many teachers in preschools can become very stressed and overwhelmed, and some of their behaviors may increase the behaviors they don't want to see in the children. I will post this article underneath in our Canvas module so that you can take a look. Suspensions can also have racist undertones. Here from the Department of Education on suspension data, we found that Black male boys were 3 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts, and African American girls were 6 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. Another punishment, missing recess, is used as a consequence usually for not finishing work or being disruptive in the classroom. Research has shown that elementary students are more effective at concentrating on school tasks when they are given occasional breaks. So you can see here how this punishment could actually lead to furthering students not being able to complete work. A modified timeout. This is a break. It includes a discussion, recognizing the child's feelings, setting clear limits, and this is different from a classical timeout. In a modified timeout, the child will not even know that you're giving them a modified timeout at all. It's a discussion. It is not where they're put in a corner and asked to think about what they did. This is a discussion between you and them where you recognize their feelings and set limits for them. Overall, what does this all mean? It means don't reward or reinforce unwanted behaviors. It can be easier to change behaviors through reinforcers than through punishments. Many forms of punishments used in schools are ineffective. And modified timeouts can be positive if used correctly and accompanied with dialogue. Overall, teachers and parents need to communicate and be thinking, I care about you and I want you to be happy. When communicating with children, adults need to get down to the child's level. Make eye contact. It's okay to be physical and hold their hand or touch their arm if they are okay with that. And always use a calm voice. Now that we know that reinforcers work best, how do you feel about this very popular and widely used behavior chart that can be found in most elementary school classrooms? If you're not familiar with the chart, how it works is each child has a pocket. In each pocket, there are 3 cards with 3 colors. Everyone starts off with the green color. If a child misbehaves, the teacher will ask them to pull a card and reveal the next color. The colors go from green, yellow to red. If you reach red, usually there is some sort of circumstance that will come up next, perhaps going to the office or a note home to a parent. It can vary depending on the teacher in the classroom. These are, again, very widely used. Now that we know what we know about rewards and punishments, how do you feel about this chart? How does this affect the mood of the classroom? How does this affect the relationship between the teacher and the child? How do you think the child feels, and what do you think the child will learn? So feel free to pause the video if you're still reflecting on some of the issues or pros and cons with this chart. I'm going to give you my opinion. I do not like this chart. I don't like this method for several reasons. One, the chart is really a public display in which you have a child go up in front of the whole class and pull a card. Children are seeing other children's cards and colors. I feel that children will learn that they won't have a chance to speak up about their behavior because it is simply pull a card. There is no discussion that goes along with this. I think children will learn that that they can be teased and made fun of for their behaviors, and that it's on public display. So, in my opinion, this is not a child-based learning scenario with behaviors. It is simply a pretty harsh punishment that can be meant to embarrass children.